You're listening to Men of Abundance, episode 207 with Sean McCoy. Today, we're coming to the table with the hard questions.
Welcome to Men of Abundance, the podcast for those looking to level up their lives by hanging out with some of the greatest leaders and established professionals in our community, living a life of integrity, honor, and the abundance mentality. Prepare to pay it forward with your host, former Army medic turned lifestyle entrepreneur, Wally Carmichael.
What is going on, Men of Abundance? I am Wally Carmichael, your founder and host of the Men of Abundance podcast, the Pay It Forward community, where we are showing you how to live a life of abundance in family, faith, finances, and fitness. Man, we got it all covered here, and we have all kinds of conversations with so many different people, so many different backgrounds. Just some of them are deep conversations, and this one is no different. We get into some deep conversation here. We have a conversation about why it is so important to challenge yourself, challenge your mind, and get into conversations you normally would not get into. You can either do that in person by talking to other people, getting into groups. You know, social media is great for this, but there's nothing like getting face-to-face and having these conversations. Other ways you can do that is pick up a book that you normally would not read. Sean brings this up later in the conversation and why it's so important. For those of you who are just now discovering Men of Abundance, I want to welcome you personally, and I would like for you to go thank whoever it is that introduced you to Men of Abundance. But don't stop there. I want you to also pay it forward and share Men of Abundance with others in your community and in your circle. Look, it's no secret that our society needs to have these conversations. Our society needs to come together and have these hard conversations and listen to this message of abundance, not just from me, but from all of the guests that I have conversations with. I originally started this podcast because I was writing a book called Living Your Life of Abundance, and I realized it was all about me. That's why I built this audience. That's why I started building this community, so that I could have these conversations with men and women who are living a life of abundance in their own right, and somehow paying it forward to the community or to the world in some cases. And later in this conversation, Sean is going to share something with you that truly lifted me up. Because as we talk about, sometimes I'm sitting on this end of the mic and I'm talking to myself. I don't know if anybody else is out there listening. Well, Sean cleared that up for me, and there are people out there listening, well, at least one, and I know it's Sean, and he shared my message with several other people in another country. All right, so let's bring out our featured guest. I'm not going to read through his entire bio because it is quite extensive, but I encourage you to go read through the rest of his bio because it's very impressive, and you can do that at menofabundance.com/207. So our featured guest today is Sean McCoy. Sean is a proud Christian, husband to Lisa, father to Emma 19, Ethan 14, and Kennedy 6. That is almost a spread like mine. He's a brother, cousin, and friend to many. He was born and raised in Houston, Texas, where he currently resides. He served in the United States Navy from 1992 to 1998 as an electronics technician while on board the USS Rushmore. He graduated with honors from the University of Houston downtown in 2004, earning a Bachelors of Science degree in Interdisciplinary Studies. Sean has traveled to 29 different countries and 36 of the 50 states. That is very impressive to me. He spent 12 years serving on numerous executive boards in the nonprofit industry, ranging from pediatric cancer to faith-based organizations. He's organized and managed numerous nonprofit fundraising events, campaigns, and general donor-related activities, helping to raise millions of dollars, but it pales in comparison to the impact it's had on people's lives. In early 2016, he started his own company, Charity Core, which is a sales and marketing company that partners with businesses to utilize philanthropy as a value add to drive new and repeat sales, which is a distinguishing value to their product and or service and an emotional driver to their customer to refer their friends and family while improving the company image and brand. In December 2017, he started as a passion project the Come to the Table podcast with the mantra of Love in action is listening to understand, not to react, and a desire to have an open, honest, loving conversation around topics ranging from race, sexuality, and gender to struggling with faith, suffering, politics, or even simple conversations like music and ancestry. Men of Abundance, it is my pleasure to introduce you to Sean McCoy. Sean, welcome to Men of Abundance, brother. How you doing?
I'm living the dream, my friend. How about you?
Man, you and me both. I definitely am. Where are you at in the world? Where are you living that dream at?
I'm down here in Houston, Texas. Is where I was born and raised, and outside of my time in the military, it's where I've been my whole life. So, yeah.
Yeah, you were in the Navy, man. That's freaking cool. Thanks for your service. I really, really appreciate that. Love talking to fellow veterans. They really get it. They get me anyway. Even though you're a different branch, we still get each other.
Yeah, I appreciate you not holding that against me. It's kind of that friendly, not as big a rivalry as our friends over in the Marine Corps, but definitely Army Navy always has a ring to it for sure.
Yeah, I've done a lot of joint operations. I've done joint operations in Chile, all over the world. I've done joint operations, and I got a couple retired Navy folks I work with over here. In fact, my first civilian job, right out of the Army, right out of retirement. Well, right out. I took 4 months off and did nothing. But I actually ended up working as an EEO specialist for the Department of Navy out here in Hawaii. And I was, that was definitely a really cool experience. Really good people over there.
Well, you find out, as you know, Wally, that after you get past all the hoorah and all the, what makes us better than y'all, that at the end we chew a lot of the same dirt, a lot of the same experiences, and it definitely creates a kinship for sure.
Yeah, it definitely does. It definitely does. And I always like that fun rivalry and stuff like that. But when it all comes down to it, it's like my brother. Me and my brother fought like cats and dogs growing up. We just fought like brothers. 2 years difference, but you weren't going to fight my brother, man. If you're going to do something, we're going to go at it. We're going to have each other's back. But we'll kill each other, but you can't have any part in that.
Amen. Amen.
Yeah. Very cool. So as you know, I like to start out the show with an attitude of gratitude. What do you have to be grateful for today, Sean?
Well, outside of the typical thing around health and my family and all the rest of that stuff, I wanted to dive a little bit deeper with this question with you. And that is really two things stood out to me as I thought about this coming into today's podcast. And of course, I'm just honored and grateful to be a part of it because I love what you're doing. But I think ability and opportunity. And what I mean by that is, one is having the ability and the resources to do something about your life and to have the chance to influence and make a difference in whatever environment you're in, whatever problems are there, that you have the ability to do something about it. And the opportunities we have relative to that are just so gracious and amazing, especially in our country. You and I both know we've traveled a bunch. Like you, I've been all over the world. Not that we're better or that there's not opportunities elsewhere, but we have so much here. And there's so many resources, there's so many chances to do something with your life and do something about those issues that are plaguing you or that are part of it, that you're not just stuck somewhere, you're not hindered. Yes, there's obstacles. Yes, there's things you have to overcome. But more importantly, we have tremendous opportunity in this country, and all of us have the ability to do something about it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that you said all of that, and we are definitely going to get deeper into that conversation right there because of what you're doing with your podcast and the message that you're sharing, which I absolutely love. And the other thing that you said there is, the fact of the matter is we are not better than any other individual. We're only better today than our version of ourselves yesterday. And
yes,
that's what I strive to be, is a better version of myself tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow, and just keep being better and keep growing to be a better version of myself. And the only way that I truly feel that we can do that is, one, traveling is super important. I just talk about that quite often, but also having these hard conversations. I literally just got off the phone today with an Army buddy of mine, and he's going through some issues. He's my brother. He's the one guy that I really can talk to, and he calls me quite often as well. And he's black, I'm white. He's got experiences that he's experiencing right now that I just can't wrap my head around, but he still calls me for advice. And that just really is important that we can have those conversations, even though he knows I don't truly understand what he's going through. He still asks for my advice, and I think that we need to have more of these conversations. And that's what you're doing with your podcast, so we're definitely going to get into that. Before we do, how would you describe yourself?
Well, so I love to serve, a little bit of kind of what you were saying a minute ago. I mean, I love to teach. I love to counsel. I don't see things in a typical light. I try to do what I can to be not only to be in the middle and to stay, not to be too optimistic, not to be too pessimistic. I definitely try to just love and to be better than I was before. As you mentioned, I don't try to be better than anybody else specifically. I'm kind of the nice guy who finishes last, but I'm going to finish, and I'm going to finish strong. And more importantly, a lot like, and what you just said really resonated with me as well. Wally, I'm the guy too that my friends call if they're going through a divorce, suffering from alcoholism, if the world's come down on them, and that heavy stuff, not just there was traffic getting home. I'm talking about at the core of them. A lot of people know they can call me, and that's what I love, to be in that position and serve and do that. And I bet you the reason your friend calls you is because he knows at the end of the day that you love him, and that's something that guys don't talk about. We've become more and more around that sentiment. We've for many years we stiff armed it. We don't want to see ourselves as emotional. But when you love somebody, and what's interesting is it comes out, and mostly I saw it first years ago in the service. When you're in the trenches with somebody, and you show that you care, you don't need to say anything. You don't need to do anything else about it. They know that. They know that when you've proven to them, you're going to be there when it hits the fan, and you're going to love them for who they are, no matter what they've done, how they've gone down. And I've had friends confess stuff to me that is not something that they're proud of, and not something I'm proud that they did. But we're able to work through that because we both love each other, and they're going to be there for me in my time of need as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And then one other thing that I'll add to that, and I know that this stands true with your relationships as well, as this guy knows I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. Sometimes I'm just there to listen. Got that. And I know when I just need to listen. Other times I'm going to call him on it, and he'll do the same for me, and I truly appreciate that, because Lord knows I need that from time to time. And not just for my wife. My wife will certainly call me on my stuff, but there's certain things and certain conversations that we just have to have with a man. And
I think in my experience too, what helps set that up a lot of times, and not that you said something about sugarcoating, and that's true, but I think at the same time, if you see somebody doing something, you see one of your fellow brothers who's doing something admirable, that's doing something good, even though sometimes that word is always subjective, but if you see something that is admirable, just tell them. Because if you're being honest with them, you can be honest with them about things that are negative, but so many times we find it hard to say something positive. And I know that's kind of the guy thing. We like to, you don't ever want to give credit to your friend for doing something well. You don't have to do it in front of everybody, but pull them to the side and say, hey, the way that you raise your kids, the way that you love your wife, the way that you serve your community, hey man, it's making a difference, and I love what you're doing. I appreciate it. Because they'll know it's true. You don't have to make a big parade about it. You don't have to go crazy about it. And that'll allow you that when it does go negative, they know you're not BSing them either. And so I think that really sets the table for a lot of that.
That's I really dig that you said that, and it is true. Guys just don't give accolades to each other enough. I had a conversation with Lee Cockerell, who was the executive vice president of operations for Disney World Resorts for several years, and one of the things he said, they said, Lee, why do you still go out and speak? Why do you do these things? Why do you still travel around and talk on stage and stuff? He said, because nobody claps when I golf. They clap when I still need that. I'm a human. I still need that recognition. I still need that somebody to be on my side and to applaud me. He's playing with it. He's got a wonderful message, of course, but I just thought that was funny, and it was appropriate for what you just said there. Guys, we need that. We need, rather, the toughest guy out there, the boss, everybody needs those positive affirmations from somebody else. We can give them to ourselves all day long, but as soon as somebody else recognizes you for picking up that piece of paper as you're walking down the street and throw it in the garbage, to writing a check for somebody, or going to help build schools and stuff around the world, we need that recognition. We really do. We like to act like we don't, but we need it.
So it's very true, and you need that. It's a little bit of that pat on the back, the pat in the butt, however you want to do it. I think that's why you see that in some of those different areas in life, and that's what it really means. You're kind of saying, hey, job well done, and it's that struggle we have, and I know you had it in the military, where it's like, this is your job, do your job, and get on with it. As a matter of fact, I want to do my job better than anything else, and I'm not going to wait and only do my job. And so I'm out doing those things. I think that's inherent in a lot of us. And not that you want recognition, you don't want a parade, you don't need medals on your chest, you don't need those things. But amongst your peers, more importantly, to have somebody look over and just kind of nod and know that hey, well done, good on you, because you can depend on them. You don't need the crazy stuff, but I think that other part of it is, and we don't do that a lot. And sometimes we don't do that other than a baseball game or a softball, pickup softball game, or maybe something cute like that. But what about just in life, the important things in regards to being a father and a husband and on those kinds of, and a friend and those kind of things? I think those are where we have opportunity to do those things, and sometimes we don't always do that. And if you feel it, you see if it just tell them. It'll be shocking a little bit, I'm sure, and you may not even know what you're going to say, and it may sound goofy, but man, give it a shot, and you wait and see what happens with people.
Yeah, it's a great feeling being on the giving end of that. It truly, truly is. So as you know, I like to get into this kick in the gut moment, and some people cringe at this point in time, but I'd love for you to share that kick in the gut moment that really took you to your knees, and kind of what did you learn from that? What was your aha moment? Where did it take you?
Well, I love that you do this, Wally. To me, there was, fortunately and unfortunately, there was a long list of things to choose from as I was going through this and trying to think of what moment I had like that made me want to talk about it. And I'll tell you, the one that I kind of came around was years ago, 2009. I got laid off from Schlumberger, and I worked at that company. It's one of the largest oilfield services companies in the world. I was as dedicated an employee as you would find. I eat, slept, breathed that company. I bled blue, as I used to say, because that was Schlumberger's colors. And anybody that knows that company is huge, multinational, all over the place, extremely successful. And I thrived. I thrived at that place. I showed up there with the intention of only working for a little bit. Was there 9 years in, loved the industry, loved what we were doing. I did so many things outside of my job. It wasn't even funny, and was so dedicated to that company. And when I got let go, it was worse than when I got divorced. And that may sound really bad, but it was a worse kick in the gut because of the level I just wasn't expecting. I didn't think it could happen. I didn't think it would ever happen. I thought it was a marriage made in heaven. I thought it was, you love me, I love you, here we go. And it was just success and everything else. And then out of nowhere, you get blindsided. And it was through that rejection, through that, then you start to feel inadequate. Then you start to feel angry and bitter and starting to ask why you, because it was 5-6 levels into layoffs, and it was almost to the point where if you go back and look in 2009, it was extremely difficult in the oil and gas industry in a lot of areas of the country at that time. And so it goes beyond just the quote unquote trimming of the fat, which I never agreed with anyway. And people start saying, then you start having to cut to the bone a little bit, and nobody's safe. But I didn't think that. I was so enraptured in the company. And I looked at it now, and everybody's like, oh, it'll have, it's nothing personal. It's not you, it's them. None of that stuff helps at that point. And I'll tell you, when somebody goes through that, don't tell them that. It is personal. Everything I do in life is personal. If you're out there, if you're at your job and it's not personal to you, I don't know why you're doing it. I think it's the biggest lie in business. And so I put everything I had into that place, and I put everything I had into everything. But that place was one more than any other that I'd hit and succeeded and strove and had done things and done well and been promoted. All those things had happened. And I was, I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't going anywhere at all. And I look back at it now, the one thing I can take away from it was in a sense, it came back to my faith a bit. And that was around the idea of idolatry. And I think that's a very easy thing to get into, where we start to idolize certain things, and that becomes part of our identity, part of who we are, part of who we think we are. It could be a job title, it could be a position in life, it could be a financial gain, it could be a house, a car, any of those things. And I'm a man of faith, as you know, and definitely not trying to preach, but for me, the idea of putting your faith and your identity in something that's tangible like that just became, I didn't see it till later, as it became a trap, and I didn't understand, I didn't see it at that point. And so it really kicked me in the gut and made me understand that at the end of the day, it's just a job. And at the end of the day, it's just a company. They're no better, they're no worse. And not that you can be replaced, but if that happens, and here's the thing, it can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't make you less of a person. I mean, it's very easy to sit there. If it's never happened to you, it's kind of like all these other things, some of these big traumatic events, somebody gets really sick or some big disease or some acute traumatic situation. So many times we hear out of that, well, I didn't think it was going to happen to me. And I always wonder now, especially from that moment, let me tell you, anything can happen to you. You're not special. I'm not special. There's nothing that says it will not happen to you. And as soon as you think that, you set yourself up for this blind side. And when it happens, if you don't have a good support group and don't have a really strong ability to reflect and look at yourself, it can take you out and spin you down a road that is very, very difficult to get out of. Depression, those things, I mean, they happen. They happen significantly. I heard stories for years, and I saw it. People would go to get let go or go to get laid off. They would hide in their desk. I saw grown men crying and weeping and things of that nature when it happened. And so and at the moment that it did, I knew, as soon as I realized it was happening, I I kind of went into this, there's that fight or flight or freeze. I was kind of numb at the beginning, and then the breaking point for me, one of the biggest part, it goes back to a little bit what we were saying. I called my wife. Now, I had just gotten married. I was not even 30 days in. I married my wonderful wife, Lisa, and I have 2 stepkids. I had been single for years before that, and here I was, 30 days into a marriage. I had a wife and 2 kids, and I just lost a job. It was my career, and the only thing I knew outside of the service for the last 9 years in a market that was not all that great. And now all of a sudden it's not just me anymore. You talk about pressure. And I called her. She's the first person I called, and she said, I just told her what happened. I'm not one to try to sugarcoat, definitely not certain situations. I can, and I do have a tendency to do that, but I was just like, look, honey, this is what happened. And all she said to me was, we're going to be okay. And as soon as she said that, like, there was that initial deflation of the pressure. She just said, we'll be all right. And having that kind of mindset, like, look, it's going to be okay. This is not the end. It seems like it. It seems like it's the end of the world. It's going to feel like it, and don't deny those feelings. Just don't stay in them, and understand you're going to go through. And it's going to ebb and flow as well. And it's not a one and done thing either. Because I went through some moments, especially at the next day as well as that. They were really trying. And then I got an email from a gentleman who I really want to give credit to. His name was Steve McGowan, and he was a president of a company here in Houston called Canoose. And anybody that's in the oil and gas industry, they were an extremely large manufacturing company that supported Halliburton, Schlumberger, these kind of companies. Very successful. And he was a president, somebody I got to know over the years. And him and I had a good relationship, but he sent me an email, and it was basically this step-by-step thing of what I needed to do. And one of the biggest things that I needed to do was keep your head up. You wake up tomorrow and get dressed. Your job is now to go find a job. Nobody likes a wounded soldier in terms of emotionally. Don't be bitter. Don't be mad. You need to take that step forward and keep going. And there was a whole bunch of other things that he wrote to me. And I remember just reading it kind of like, it was when you're younger, you don't always listen to advice, and you have that tendency to, when you're getting sage advice from father-like figures and people. But he was telling me these things, and something resonated that I needed to shut up and listen to what he was saying. And I literally, to a T, did everything that he told me. And it turned out to be the best advice that I ever got relative to that in terms of how to handle that. And he didn't tell me that it was okay. He said, you're going to be mad. You're going to be bitter and you're going to be angry, but just don't stay in that area and keep going and move on. Take the high road. Don't be that person who goes back and looks at everything that ever happened as negative. Because I did. I had a wonderful time there. And there's no reason to let one day, one decision, which really, at the end of it, if you start looking at this stuff, even now, it happens still to this day. These are decisions that are made, unfortunately, to some extent, or to a lot of extent, not really with any kind of real personal touch involved. They can't. You got companies making decisions of impacting 10, 20, 30,000 jobs at a clip. There's no way to be personal at that point. And that sounds really unfortunate for our environment and the kind of people that we are. The fact that humans are personal people. But it still is up to you on what you want to do about it. You can wallow in that misery and that kick, because it was I felt betrayed. I felt angry, and it didn't just happen overnight. But listen to that advice. You'll know that advice that's coming and what's well intended. Stick with it and hold, and be steadfast in your reaction to it, and understand that it's not going to be a one and done thing. And those kick in the gut moments like that one for me can actually turn around and help you build character and allow you to be there later on down the road for yourself and for others that go through the same situation.
Wow, that is a big one. That is a big one. So what did you end up doing? What happened after that? What was the next chapter of your life?
Well, so what was interesting was I was very fortunate the next day. It was on a Thursday that it happened. By noon the next day, I actually had 3 job offers, and this is in a down market, in a very bad market at that time. I had 3 job offers, literally job offers saying, hey, come with me by noon that next day in my personal email account. So I went into the other side of the oil and gas business. So I was on the Schlumberger side. It's a service company. I was mostly on manufacturing, and then I got into the sales and marketing side. So people like Schlumberger became my customer for the next 7 years in the oil and gas industry before I started my own company. And it was a step into that different. And so it was a change. It was a fundamental change outside of manufacturing, outside of kind of being the customer. I got to become the salesperson. And it was more I really enjoyed that part of it. I enjoyed serving people. I enjoyed being a part of that process and solving that problem, which is really what I ultimately found out that sales really is. You can be slick and have a mantra, and you can sell ice to an Eskimo. But the problem is you can't sell ice to an Eskimo twice. And so I was really enthralled with the idea of relationship building, serving your customer from a continual standpoint, because the sales cycle and the entire operations inside the oil and gas industry, especially the area that I was in, was very much a long-term thing. You're not going to quick sell a lot of the aspects that I dealt with. And so it became that was the second half of it. And it proved to be, again, another half of my 16 years in the oil and gas industry. And it was the second half of it was as fruitful and not as amazing as the first half, to be honest.
Well, check this out, guys. This is the very interesting thing that I hope you're getting from this is, you don't just get laid off from a job that you've worked at for 10, 5, whatever amount of years, and then automatically that next day get 3 job offers. That doesn't just happen. There's a specific reason why that happened. And as far as I can tell, Sean, you're a server. You serve people, and you obviously did a lot. You impressed a lot of people, and you did a lot of people right. Because impressing somebody and doing them right are 2 different things. There's people that have impressed me that are just assholes, quite frankly. They're very skilled, but I would never want to work with them personally. That's just being real about it. But what do you feel was the main reason that you just walked right into 3 different job offers?
Well, I think you kind of touched on it, and pardon my lack of humility a little bit when I mean by this, is to build off of what you said. And my advice to those out there is that understand that every person you have ever come across, if you're young, especially if you're young right now, and you're listening to this, understand that every person you put in your phone, because you're going to have that phone in that contact list for the rest of your life, especially nowadays. It's not like it before where things are on paper. You're going to have those groups. Never delete a contact. Just understand who that person is. Treat them how you want to be treated, even if that person at that moment, years ago, right now, may not be somebody who has anything to do with what you need at the moment. So many times we're in such a rush to make the here and now work that we dismiss people that are sitting in front of us that in 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years from now could be the person who is the sales rep or is the manager at a company you just walked in the door in. That is going to happen. I guarantee you that will happen. On some level, you're going to run into somebody again who at one point in your time in life had no reason to be, it couldn't serve you directly at that point. But if you've established a relationship with that person, they're going to remember that. They're going to remember that, and it's going to impact you later. And it's going to be part of who you are from a character standpoint and how you get things done. And then you continue, and even the ones that you do serve, even the ones that are the most important at that time, the style with which you do that. That same company, there was a guy, Terry Savely was their lead sales guy, and he used to take everybody at Schlumberger golfing because he wanted to go and see how they would act. And he did that for a couple of reasons. And he told me one day, because I got to know him really well, he was a great guy, a vet. He was he was the first guy that ever thanked me for my service. And thank you for yours as well, Wally. And combat medic and all the stuff you've done it's just been an amazing career. And I appreciate what you've done over the years and all the things that you've done relative to your service. And so I definitely want to say that. But he was the first guy that told me that. And he would take people golfing because he wanted to see what they would do. He wanted to see how they would act on a golf course. What would they get? Would they get drunk? Would they drink too much? Would they start running their mouths? Would they start hating on their boss? Would they start bad-mouthing the company? Would they cheat at the game? And he knew, and he told me, he goes, I know, I can tell what kind of person they're going to be by watching them and how they interact with something like golf. How do they chip they duff a chip? What is that going to do? How are they going to react at that moment? And see how they interact with their other employees. How do they interact with people that they work with, work for, and work around? And you can tell, and that's why a lot of those guys do that. It's not just to take you golfing so that you can have a good time. They're watching you, and everybody is watching everything you do and how you do it and the method by which you get it done. Now, you may be able to accomplish something, and even in the military, while you know this, as rigid as a system as we had in the military, the chain of command, which is really, it's very, very concise. And it's set up so that if you're in charge, your word is bond, and that's true. But at the same time, relationships got things done a whole heck of a lot more than the chain of command ever did. Your ability to work with somebody else, your ability to understand their problems, and you help them with theirs and theirs with yours. When you do that and you show your ability to help them get something done that they need, even if it doesn't mean anything to you, over a period of time, that's what's going to get things done. And ultimately, that's what works in business. I could make phone calls years ago. I remember. I'd have guys walk in my office and say, hey, I'm trying to get a hold of this supplier, this person over here, or this person in another department, and they're not listening to me. They won't reply to my emails, and they're carrying the same Schlumberger tag that I was. And I could make one phone call and I could get something done. And I'm not trying to brag about that. What I mean for that is those that are out there, who you are. Now, you may work for some big bad company. That Schlumberger logo is really fun to run around with, and it gets a lot of respect, a tremendous amount of respect in the oil and gas industry. But what will never change is how much respect you get from other people. That logo will take you so far. But the minute that logo's gone or something like that happens, trust me when I tell you, if you don't have something to back that up with, it really won't matter. You're going to be going by the wayside. And so to your original question around all of that, I would suggest to people out there, look, you're going to set the tone for who you're going to be for the rest of your life, who you treat, how you treat them. That stuff, no, it didn't just happen that morning. There were people wanting that to happen anyway. And then there was more after that. And so I was always been lucky. And since that day, I have yet to have a job in the last, it was 2009, almost 10 years up until I started my company. I never had a job that I ever had to apply for. I never applied for another job because people wanted to reach out to me. They wanted to know they knew that I was that person they needed for that particular job, or that they at least wanted to consider. And you'll see that as you get older. And so that all is set, that tone is always set in the beginning when they work with you and all those years in the beginning, as far as that goes.
Wow. Yeah. Very powerful information, especially for you young guys to start living by that. Some of you old guys, sorry, man. If you already burned those bridges, you know what? Start building. Do something. It's never too late, though. But you brought up your company, and I want to talk about that. I want to talk about Charity Corps. Where did that come from? What are you doing there? Who are you serving?
So that was born out of an idea. So as I was working in the oil and gas industry back in 2005, my life changed around my faith and around my perspective, around my priorities in life. Working and being successful in the business world was, and even to some extent the military, just kind of professional attitude made sense to me. I understood economics, understood how business worked. And then I got involved with a charity softball tournament called the Derricks and Diamonds Charity Softball Tournament, started by National Oil Varco here in Houston. It was their first year. They called over to Schlumberger. It was a business-to-business thing. They wanted us to be a part of it. I was tapped to do it because I used to help, even in the military. I would organize golf leagues and softball leagues and all kinds of stuff, all that kind of stuff to do things around enjoying time like that. And so they asked me to help coordinate it with another friend of mine, Suzanne. Anyway, Fade to Black, we do all that. We end up, I was at that moment, I got to hear this guy speak about how events like this, one simple softball tournament over a weekend, we raised something like $15,000. We were part of it, and this guy came up and gave this speech about how awesome it was because this money went to help offset costs at the local Texas Children's Hospital, which is the largest in the country. And hey, look, we wish we could give away stuff for free. We do, and we try to. We can't always, but this helps offset that. And I started looking around and saw the resources we had, saw the environment we had. This was great. It was a great event to be a part of. It was team building. It built community relationships. It built relationships in the business world. All these things that I loved, and so I took off on that. And it led me down a road of working around kind of this interactive between business and the nonprofit industry, basically around charity and around business. And for so long, I saw these two worlds kind of living in a dichotomy, kind of against each other, where the one's almost the antithesis of the other. One can't make their own money and needs other people to give it. The other one's primary purpose is to make money. And by giving it away, it doesn't always inherently make sense. And yes, there's tax benefits and all the rest of this stuff, but if you could find this way to kind of align these two things between the business world and the nonprofit world, and I'm in Houston, which is statistically and for the most part considered the most philanthropic city in the country. We give away an incredible amount of money, but it's not just giving it away. It's about doing something with it. It's about making it purposeful, and it's about creating an opportunity for a bit of an ROI, which is okay as well. And this is really where my company comes in, around this idea that there is a nature to wanting to look over and be pious, to saying, well, if you're going to be charitable, you should give and not expect anything. And I understand piety, and I'm all for it, and it's a big part of my faith, and I agree with that. There's things you should do, and don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing, kind of thing. And I agree with that. It doesn't always translate into business. And what I mean by that is a business by its very nature cannot just give away things, and definitely can't give away profit and expect to survive. It just isn't feasible, and there's not really a smart decision to do that. And at the same time, getting a return on your investment is part of any cost. When you invest in a person to work for you, or you invest in a website, or you invest in equipment for your podcast, that investment is money you're willing to spend to get a return based on that investment. That's just a simple business principle, and there's nothing wrong with that. And at the same time, I also think we have a little bit of a tendency in this country right now. We have this division around vilifying businesses for being successful in some level. Like either you have to be this profit mongering, evil corporation who doesn't care about anything except the bottom line over here, or I don't know, or there's kind of this vague understanding of a company that's a social enterprise, like a Tom's or something like that. But then they end up becoming a little bit of that too. So it's this constant ebb and flow back and forth. And I think the reason why is because we have this expectation on the business. And I saw this at Schlumberger. Our customer was something like ExxonMobil. And I remember having this discussion with a young lady, and she was like, well, I want to do this bike ride in Sealy, Texas to help raise money for veterans. We had turned around and made this charity softball tournament because I got involved in it. We were raising $300,000 a pop every time we were doing this event. Right now, it's actually this weekend as we're recording this. This weekend is the 14th tournament that's going to have around this entire. I'm still involved in the event, even though I'm long gone from Schlumberger. But they asked me to be around it, and we're going to hit over $3 million we've raised in the last 13 years, which is a nice money thing. Wow. But it pales in comparison to the actual human interaction and value that it has. Well, all that to be said, she was saying, hey, they asked me to come to be part of this conversation. Hey, we need to raise money. Well, of course, every event, that's the whole thing. Well, we sell sponsorships and we do this and how much we're going to charge. And she said, well, we need to get ExxonMobil involved. They just had their first $10 billion quarter. And she was like, oh, well, hey, $5,000 to ExxonMobil is no big deal. Surely they can do that. And that mindset makes sense. I understand why you look over and say, well, Warren Buffett's got $50 billion. He can give away whatever. Or some corporation has all this money. They can give it away. It sounds right, but and I told her, I go, you're never going to get that money out of them. You're never going to get that money because they haven't budgeted it. They don't know how to, they can't just give away $5,000 to everybody that asks them because the entire world is asking them. And so then what I started to see as well is in Houston, we have 22,000, and that's 22,000 individual 501c3 public charities in Houston. What I also saw was there is a tremendous amount of need out there. Well, and I'm not trying to be sad about it. I'm just trying to tell you that there are so many organizations that wake up every morning in this country, and they go out and they try to fight for some cause, for some mission to make the world a better place. That is literally what they're doing. Nonprofits wake up every day. They have to get resources for them to operate, for them to be able to fulfill their mission, for them to be able to serve the community, for them to be able to give money for research for cancer, or to help fight, to provide resources for people that are going through Alzheimer's or epilepsy or homelessness or literacy. All these things cost money. There's a cost around it. And I didn't ask for that to be the system, but it is what it is. So all that to be said, here you have this need for a company, for a business that needs to be, they're going to need to invest wisely. They want to be involved in the community. A lot of them don't know how. I used to get this question all the time at Schlumberger. They're like, why are we doing this charity softball tournament for Texas Children's Cancer Center when there are thousands, literally thousands and thousands of causes, thousands and thousands of organizations, even a business? How do they pick? How do they choose who to help? If you choose one or two that you've picked, but you've not chosen 21,998. And it's not that those aren't worthy, and it's not that one's better than the other. They're not. Organ donation versus epilepsy versus Alzheimer's versus autism versus you name it. And they're all sob stories. And so what I saw was this opportunity to say, okay, well, instead of making it part of the profit, and you started to see this bubble up through things like Amazon Smile, you see it bubble up through things, cause marketing a little bit, where it's like, okay, what if we make it part of the sales transaction? Businesses spend an incredible amount of money to generate sales. And so I thought, well, what if you link that part of it, only now instead of running an advertisement or spending your dollars in somewhere else, take that cost that you're willing to give out for a return and say, hey, if I donate 10%, if I donate 5%, if I donate $1,000 for every pool that I sell, instead of a discount, or instead of giving it to advertising or just to some random charity, what if I let my customer choose? And so that was the whole crux of what I saw, because at the same time, relative to a business outside of your employees, the most important people that I saw for years in the oil and gas or in business, your customers are your most important, and they're the most they're treated based on what they do. So if you when I was at my last company, I ran the sales and marketing department for Halliburton. They were a $45 million a year customer out of a $150 million a year business. Well, they were the lion's share of the business, so they got the most attention. And that's just what you do in business. It doesn't make them better. It's just it's that 80-20 rule and a whole bunch of other stuff. And it also makes sense. You go with who goes there the most. So let your customer choose. And so what we've done is we partner with businesses, and we manage that program. Because the other reason businesses don't do that a lot now is because it's logistically difficult. They can't research 22,000 nonprofits. They don't know how to coordinate all the money. They don't know when to do it. When they're trying to sell fences or flowers or run a restaurant or whatever, they don't have the time to do that part of it. So I saw this opportunity to create a company that filled that need. And what we do is we bridge that gap, and we link consumers, businesses, and nonprofits together based on an opportunity. So you could download, it's an app that goes on your phone, you download it, there's businesses on there. If you go buy something from them, every time you buy something from them, there's a donation is generated for your favorite nonprofit, and that's the whole system. And so it's meant to create an opportunity to align philanthropy with all of them, and so that now I can be philanthropic as an individual, but I'm not being asked to give money out of my pocket. And the business can do something, and now they have a way to engage all these They don't have to say no anymore. They can help all 22,000 if they want, and it creates that opportunity. So it makes it a little bit easier for everybody to manage, and the nonprofit can now engage their support base in such a way that doesn't require them to say, hey, can you give us more money and more money? Can you add another $10 to your monthly payment? Instead, it could be, hey, what if you download this app and just buy stuff like you normally do? And when you do that, you can now then generate revenue for them, and it then generates sales for the business, and it helps them first. And that's where the whole thing starts, is around making the business successful through sales.
Wow. That's brilliant. I love it. I really, really love it. And, I'm thinking of like these, pessimists, I guess, and people like to, say, well, they're donating money to so-and-so because it's a tax write-off, or they got some sort of loophole or something like that. It's like, you know what, that might be true. But consider this. And I remember hearing this story somewhere, and I don't remember where I heard this story yet. But you got a guy who, he's got a job offer, and he's been out of a job for however long, over a year, and he's got this job offer. All he's got to do is get there, and in order to get there, to get this job, to move his family and everything, he needs $1,000. Bottom line up front, there's no other way. He's strapped. He's got no more friends to give him money, nothing. And you got these two guys. One guy comes walking down the street, and he's just, he loves helping people. He just loves giving money, helping any way he can. He's got $100 in his pocket. That's all he's got in the world. And he gives the guy $100. And you got this businessman who's, been in business for years, and he knows a way that he can give the guy the $1,000 and actually get a tax break on it and, make an extra $200. He could care less if he's helping the guy or not, but he can give the guy the $1,000. And the question comes up is, who's doing the most good? And, you can play around with that all you want, but my thought process is ultimately the guy that needed the job and needed the money got the $1,000 regardless of how he got it. And the guy that gave him the money was able to give him the money and had the resources, benefited from it too. I think it's a win-win. I think it's a great thing. And I think it's a great thing that the one guy would give up the $100, but that $100 didn't really do anything for the guy who needed the $1,000. Makes sense? Oh no, 100%. And I get on my soapbox about that as well, because we're a for-profit business. My company, we're not a charity. And it's okay if you want to run a business like a charity, or you want to run a nonprofit, that's fine too. But don't get mad at a for-profit business for wanting to be profitable, because my entire thing around that statement, and one of my first things I talk about in terms of my little soapbox, you will never have philanthropy if a business is not successful. You can't, by default, that's not going to happen. If the business doesn't operate anymore, they're not paying their salaries, they're not paying the light bill, they can't do anything, let alone do something philanthropic. So I understand, and I've been around the nonprofit industry for the last 12 years. My wife is knee deep in it and runs with all kinds of the one percenters in Houston. You have all kinds of people. Okay, yes, there are some people that do it strictly for tax benefit and for their own glory. Fine. Stop vilifying them for doing something, and let it be what it is. You take care of you, and you know what your intentions are. But if this person over here, because I'll see it, I've seen billionaires, literally billionaires, who want their name on everything that they're doing, and they want their name on it. And they've also seen them where they just write a check and they don't want anybody to know they did it. Who's doing more? You're getting caught in the details. I agree with you. At some point, what happens is, does this need get met? That guy still needed that $1,000. We need money for research for name your disease. Look at what happened in the Ice Bucket Challenge. This is what gets me all fired up. Look, I don't know if every dollar that's ever been spent by a charity is done the right way. Yes, there's some that misuse it. Are you in the military? You could tell stories, and I could all day long, of how much money did we waste
on so much stuff, so how many inefficiencies and all the rest of the stuff. I saw it in even in the most well-run companies. You're going to have waste, but you're going to get so wrapped up in that and get mad at some charity because some percentage doesn't line up, or because they're paying their whatever, some amount of money. Well, here's the thing too. There's a fiduciary responsibility to all this. Just because they're a nonprofit and they're a charity doesn't mean they don't have responsibilities, like legal responsibilities around that organization. And you have something like the American Red Cross, and they do a lot of things well, and they mess up too. But you can't have a $3 billion a year organization and have the chief financial officer of that company, of that organization, however you want to look at it, who has the fiduciary responsibility to run that company well. You can't ask your neighbor who has an Excel sheet, who's really good at Excel, to run that, who does some accounting and some bookkeeping. You have to have a professional, which means you have to pay them. And that's what happens. And no, you can't expect that person to then be, well, they need to take 60, 70% off of their salary. Do they need to make an exorbitant amount? I don't know. I don't know where the happy place is. I go back and forth on that all the time. But I think we get wrapped up in that. And in the meantime, what's not happening is we're not helping those that are in need. And that's where that's where I'm like, I want to hit the pause button and say, look, can we argue about this later? We're not helping, and we need to get more money here. That the Alzheimer or the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge generated like $100 million in revenue for the ALS Association. It was 30 times their revenue in one 12-month period. They were able to fund research out of Europe that they brought to the United States that helped identify a gene, which they believe is the beginning of turning off that particular disease with a gene marker. What is that worth? If you could eradicate Lou Gehrig's disease, go talk to somebody. Go watch a video of somebody who's gone through it. Look, I mean,
I got a friend of mine who's also a veteran, who found out he had ALS while he was on active duty. And yeah, it's not a fun thing to watch, guys. I'm telling you this right now. And also go read the book or listen to the audio, Tuesdays with Maury. That'll give you an idea.
Or I mean, I wouldn't say to do this because you don't want to treat people like they're some sort like they're in a zoo. But if you've ever seen a child go through cancer, I mean, see a child die of cancer or a blood disorder, or a child suffer in any way from, name your disease, kidney issues, heart issues, lung, pulmonary, right? How much of that do we need to see before we stop worrying about these details over here that we can figure out later, and we can all be grown-ups about and be responsible about, and have some trust that that's being happened. We're not helping the issue by arguing over here on the side about it. So that's a big part of it too, because I want to get as much money as I can into the hands of nonprofits. And if that means I can help businesses succeed and get them sales, then so be it. I'm all for that. And that's the crux of what my company's doing.
Wow. Yeah, I love it, man. I really do. And I can get on the soapbox as well about this, because
for sure.
You just summed it all up for real. I mean, but I want to transition. We still got the Pay It Forward round coming up, but even before we do that, man, I really want to put some love and spotlight on the Come to the Table podcast. Just the messages that you're sharing over there and the conversations that you're having, I just absolutely, they just have to be said. Can you share a little bit about that and where that's gone, and what are you doing with it now?
Sure. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it. You're coming on very soon, so this is appropriate. You were very gracious to be one of my guests. This is one of those things that kind of, I think is an homage to what you're doing. I had no idea I was going to do a podcast. I was a podcast listener for years, many, many years, loved listening to them, and never thought that it was something that I could or should or even had the opportunity to do. And then it kind of hit me that I realized that I actually, with a little bit of equipment and some help with some friends that knew a little bit more about it than I did, that you just need a microphone and a chance to talk. And then it really ended up being a whole lot easier than I thought. But the biggest reason I did it, especially after the 2016 election, and I think it started really honestly for me way back in 2000 when President Bush and former Vice President Gore were going through their time, and you just saw these people, all this division. You didn't just see differences of opinion. The vitriol and the anger that seems to be perpetuated out there and seems to be made worse over and over again through the keyboard warriors on Facebook and social media and those at different places. I saw that and I heard it, and I saw people that I knew participating in it, and I saw people that I knew doing things from a little bit easier from an armchair standpoint than it is actually sitting there talking to somebody. And I also felt from a faith standpoint, my faith is very important to me. I'm a Christian, but at the same time, I would see a lack of, and I don't want to, this is that dichotomy. I don't want to pass judgment, but I'll just say I didn't see a lot of Jesus in a lot of my fellow Christians, as ironic as that may sound. And for the most part, there's a lot of people out there going, well, yeah, that's one of the reasons I'm not a big fan of it. Every time I turn around, there's some Christian who's not acting like a Christian at all. And so I didn't do it just just to try to offset that, because I do believe in what the words in red are saying. Right, the woman at the well, Jesus went down and talked to her where she was, and he looked at her. He talked to her as a person, and he addressed her with dignity, and he didn't judge her, and he just talked to them. And for the most part, we're asked to just love one another for where they are and what they're doing. And so to that, I also had to understand my own shortcomings, my own biases, my own inability to listen, and to challenge myself that in my experience. I remember years ago in the Navy, actually, I read a book there was the autobiography of Malcolm X. One of the most, I know that's coming, but that's going to be one of the ones I was going to recommend. Actually, I'll, some other ones, but what I'm going to recommend around is challenging myself to think differently and to listen to somebody else with a different point of view of mine, a different experience, something that I may not even agree with or not even understand or I don't know anything about. For me, just to dismiss them and just say, well, I don't see the racism as an issue in 2018 because we had a black president in 2016, or I don't really understand people that are gay, and why would you want to live that way, or what's transgender? I don't understand bisexual. I don't understand why somebody is a Democrat or a Republican, and to just dismiss people for what they feel and what they believe in without ever listening to their story or their experience. I just think there's a tremendous amount of missed opportunity for us to progress and grow and thrive as a culture and as people if we just dismiss other people for what they think and what they say. And so in lieu of that, I just had this idea of literally asking somebody to come to the table, as you mentioned, called the Come to the Table podcast. I just want to sit and have a conversation. I'm not trying to have an argument, because those are petty, and they become very, the memes and mic dropping and all the rest is, who won and who lost. In the end, I haven't seen very many people's lives changed over a YouTube video in terms of how well somebody argued some other point. There has, I'm sure, but then you're just switching one loyalty towards the other way, but you're not really growing, and I don't think you're really bringing people in, and you're not really giving yourself a chance to expand what you look at in terms of another person, and can you understand them? When I had my stepbrother on who's gay, and when you listen to the pain in their voice, when you listen to them saying when he traveled the world, I mean, Wally, when's the last time you traveled the world and had to worry about where you were going relative to the fact that you were married and who you loved? I've never had to worry about that. He was talking about being in Berlin. They wanted to go to St. Petersburg, and they chose not to because they knew there was a risk there. They changed the way they act in public towards each other in terms of affection and whatever. I dote on my wife all the time. I hug her, kiss her. It drives a lot of people that we know kind of crazy. And I'm fine with that, but I'm very affectionate towards my wife. I've never had to worry about that in terms of somebody getting on me about that. And so when he's telling me the story, and he has, I have to take a step back, and whether or not I don't understand what you guys want to do. I don't, and I don't understand that, but that's what they've chosen to do. But they have to live that way every day. And so for me, just to dismiss that and just be like, and throw it away and not give some opportunity to at least have a conversation, to put it out there to the world. If somebody could listen to something that I'm talking with somebody else, and it could change them and motivate them to then go have a conversation with somebody else, that was the whole reason I came up with the podcast idea. Just because, kind of like you in this, you just want to get that message out to people. And if you can change one life, and Drew's episode I just listened to that's on your podcast, because I love listening to your podcast, and we can talk about that, because one of yours had a big impact on something I did recently. But just the opportunity to impact somebody's life, and when you get that organic reach, I've had people reach out to me and say, hey, I found your podcast. I love what you're doing. It's forced me to have conversations I've never had. I've had guys tell me that it's forced them to have conversations with their own wives they've never had. My second episode was around the Me Too movement, and I had to admit that I'd never asked my wife anything about it. My own wife. I'd never said, hey, honey, have you ever been sexually harassed at work? And she's like, well, yeah, I'd never had a conversation with my own wife. And so sometimes it's very easy to point over and look at other people and see what they're doing wrong and do all that stuff. But when's the last time we had an opportunity to challenge ourselves around what we think and what we know, and where can we grow? Because in the end, that's the real opportunity, man. That's the chance for you to do something, which goes in line with what you're talking about. How do you become abundant? How do you do that stuff? You have to look within, man. Where's your chance for you to grow in who you are and what you're doing? You're not going to get that by telling somebody else what they've done wrong. Well, hey, Wally, you need to do this. You need to change this about your life. And if you can only do this, Wally, your life would be great. And that's my job, is to tell you. Man, that's not, I just don't buy into that. And so the idea behind all of that is around what the podcast is about, talking about mental health, suicide. I don't care what it is. We'll talk about anything with anybody. And it doesn't have to be always serious, and it's not. But I'm more than happy to dive into some very difficult subjects. And there are some very difficult ones. Race, you alluded to it earlier. I mean, Is there a more divisive issue right now in our country? Not many. And what does it do? No. And it just continues. What are we doing about it? And what are we doing? And yelling at the television or popping off on Facebook, that's not doing anything about it. Just in my opinion, it's not. It just really isn't.
No, it's not. It usually causes much more harm in the end, for sure, because it's just a bunch of little jabs. It's not a true conversation. It's a little meme here, a jab here, a long context here that's always typed out in anger and then taken out of context. And it does absolutely no good. We're not having conversations on social media about this stuff. There are some good videos out there. I've posted several videos of people, like the guy that was on the radio show said he was racist, and the black guest that was on there gave him some advice, and then she got up and she went to him, and they sat down and had that conversation.
Did you know? So in that, I tagged that guy. He's friends. I found him on Facebook. Gary Civitello. Yeah. So I have him on my list of guests that come on because I want to talk to him. He called up, and you're right. And that's the kind of stuff I love to share on Facebook. And look, even though I've changed a lot about what I'm doing on social media, but that's the stuff I made a vow to myself about. That's been about 6-8 months, and I'm out there for everybody to call me out if I haven't. But I just try to do zero negativity of any kind on social media, anywhere, in any way, shape, or form, and just share. And you're doing it. I see you doing it, not only on the Men of Abundance page, but on your personal page, sharing. There's another message out there, and there's a lot of wonderful people doing some amazing stuff that is just gut-wrenching, heart-wrenching, wonderful stuff for our fellow human beings. And this guy was one. He called up and he said, "Look, I feel like I'm a racist, and I feel bad about it. I want to change. What can I do?" Instead of calling up and just lambasting somebody for their opinion. And it created the beauty of it that you see in the real change in people on both of them. That's the other thing too, is it gave them, the young lady that he talked to, who they become friends now, it's changed her life. We have that opportunity every day. You could create a podcast where you're out, just being hateful and vengeful and angry, but you've chosen to do this with your Men of Abundance podcast and have an impact on somebody's life that is positive. We have that choice. And that's really what that was the essence of. And that's why I love stuff like that. I love what you're doing and all this other stuff. And so I just want to add a little bit of a voice to that with mine. And just if it could have an impact on somebody in the same way, then all right, it's worth all the effort and time.
Man, yeah. I appreciate what you're doing because it's definitely needed. And I'm digging it personally. So, brother, we're at the point where we're going to pay it forward. You ready to do that?
Yes, sir, I am.
Hey, guys, I need a huge favor from you, and this has very high potential of being very beneficial to you as well. You may or may not know, but I recently launched a new e-learning platform called Abundance and Prosperity Mastery, and this is where I combine the abundance mindset with marketing and business strategies. And I'm in the process of writing a book that specifically details my ability to find a minimum of $10,000 in additional revenue for any industry out there. And I'm convinced I can do this for any industry out there, and I do this in just 45 minutes. And this is a service that I'm currently offering to select clients. So what I'm asking of you as a Men of Abundance listener is if you would consider letting me perform this service for you in your industry, especially if it's an industry I have not worked in yet, and then just use your results as a future case study in my book, either under your business name or anonymously. And again, as a Men of Abundance listener, I won't charge you anything for this service, and all I ask in return is your written permission to use your results from my book. And if I impress you, maybe just a brief testimonial I can use as well. If you're willing and ready to do that favor for me, then send me an email to info@apmasterycoach.com. That's Alpha Papa masterycoach.com, and in the subject line put 10K book, and then in the body of the email just put a brief description of what your industry is and maybe a few of your biggest challenges. I will then get back with you with a calendar link so that you and I can get on the line and I can show you how I can find $10,000 of revenue in your business in 45 minutes. And as an added bonus, just for helping me out, I will share with you the 3 biggest lead generation mistakes small businesses make and how to overcome every one of them. All right, let's get back to the conversation. Share 1 to 3 actionable steps with our abundant leaders that they can take today.
So one, I was going to say, hit the pause button and assess where you are in life and reset your perspective every day. I think that's one of the things you have to do. Just take a moment. We've heard this phrase since we were kids, smell the roses, all that stuff. But when I'm talking, really hit the pause button and do that. Second thing is challenge what you know. Don't assume you know anything, even if you're an expert on it. You know this from, if you just said, well, I've been trained about, the XYZ in terms of being an EMT and a medic, and I don't have anything else left to learn. What are you limiting yourself in terms of your opportunity to grow? Challenge and reaffirm everything that you think that you've learned, and constantly push to expand on that knowledge base. And then the last thing is, take that first step on anything. Somebody you haven't talked to in a while, you need to apologize to somebody, you want to start a podcast, you want to start a company, take that first step. Whatever it is that you know what it is, whatever that thing ringing in your head, that put the pride aside, put the worry aside, and take that first step is the third thing I'd say about those things. And those are actionable steps I think we can all do. And the beauty about that is make that part of your habitual approach to everything that you're doing on a day-to-day, and watch the flowers bloom in all aspects. Because it's not, those are things, my actionable steps are always kind of they're in the middle. They're not specific, and you can then apply them as those situations comes up, because it could be any of those things as far as that goes.
Yeah, absolutely. Excellent action steps. What daily habits make the biggest impact in your life, Sean?
I think I start with I read the Bible. It's one of my big things. It gives me a perspective. I also read some other things. There's a book by Oswald Chambers called My Utmost for His Highest, which is really, and it's what I mean by that, and I want to address this because I think it's important. A lot of times you hear that, and it's like, oh, here we go with the holy roller, and or he listens to this music, or he's this, he reads the Bible. He must be one of those really cool people, or he thinks he's better than everybody else. No, I read the Bible because it challenges who I am. What I read pushes who I am as an individual. It makes me know that what I'm saying or what I'm thinking needs to be altered sometimes. It might getting destitute. It sounds real positive. We tend to do this, but there are times where you don't always feel it. You don't always feel all that. You don't always feel the happiness, and you don't always feel all the positive stuff. You get into a rut. And what in your world is pushing you to stay out of that, or your viewpoint on something? I just recently forgave my parents over a bunch of stuff, which is a long story, but it was years of listening to the words in red in the Bible telling me, hey, if you don't love others, if you don't forgive other people, it doesn't matter. You don't get it. You need to do this. And it was something that I didn't want to do. I was like, no, but I have this right to be angry, and I have all this stuff, and I'm going to hang on to this. But it pushed me to be a better person. It's not just there so I can tell you so that you can feel good about it. Oh, well, Sean reads his Bible. He must be a really nice guy. That's not why I do it. That's one of the actual steps. Whatever it is, find something that's going to push you in what you're thinking, and challenge what you're thinking, and challenge who you are. Don't just stay in that echo chamber all the time. That's definitely one thing I would do as far as that makes a big impact on my life is pushing, whatever it can be, anything along those lines, for sure.
Excellent. Well, you've mentioned several books already, but what else would you recommend to our abundant leaders to read, and why? Read or listen to, and why?
Well, two of the books I haven't mentioned, in a context out there, I would say, find something that you, first and foremost, if you don't like these videos, or first and foremost, if you don't like these books, find your version of them. One of the books I'm reading, this may sound contrary to the Bible, which is, look, the most widely read, most widely published, all that stuff. If I told you all these things about it statistically, you think, okay, what's there? Read it, even if you're going to read something like Proverbs, just for what it's saying. Read it for what it means. It's not meant to be there as a hammer to take on people, but find something that challenges you. But specifically, there's a book called The Covenant, which is by a guy named Bernard Lamberel. Now, this may sound odd to say in lieu of, at the same time I'm reading the Bible, I'm reading this. This is a guy who spent 15 years, and his entire book is around coming up with an argument that says that basically Abraham was a real person, and that his covenant was with a Mesopotamian king and not with God. And so it's basically an argument shattering the foundation of all three of the major world faiths. And I found him through Twitter and through another podcast I listened to, and I'm reading his book. Now, understand, his viewpoint is, hey, all these faiths are made up, including mine, the one that I believe in. But I'm reading it because it's challenging me in what I believe. It's challenging my mindset. And I don't want to just dismiss people because it's a book around a subject that I may not be comfortable with. You have to find some level of comfort in that discomfort. And another one I'm reading is the New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, which is a book about basically the modern day slavery. Slavery has never really ended. The argument is it's perpetuated into the prison system, and that it's never really stopped. And that there's a specific caste system and an objective around society to keep African Americans in prison as a layover, as a holdover from the civil rights, after the civil rights movement, and to keep slavery and segregation and Jim Crow alive. These are not comfortable books to read. They're not fun in a sense, but they're challenging to me. And where I thrive, and as a person at least, and what I would recommend, find something that challenges what you think. Because what it's done for me in a lot of these areas is it's either going to change your opinion on something and rectify maybe a viewpoint that you had, or it's going to help reinforce what you already believe. It helps reinforce that strength of something that you find dear. And so it's an ebb and flow. It's an evolution of thought process. So those are the ones, the Bible. Oswald Chambers is a great one because it's a daily thing. And his is too. He wrote it for himself, and his wife had him publish it. But it's basically it's a challenge to his own self. And I know I keep saying that, but to me that's where you get, if you just create an echo chamber and you're just reading the same thing over and over again, you can learn from it. I'm not saying you can't. But how do you grow? How do you get that neuroplasticity to expand in a sense? How do you get your experiences and if you only travel to Utah, yeah, Utah's a wonderful place, beautiful, but if you never go anywhere else, it's kind of like traveling. If you've never gone somewhere you've never been, to never experience the smells, the sights, the tastes, well, then you just lose out on what that opportunity could be and what it could define for you. It may not be prettier than Utah. It may not be better than the Rocky Mountains, but who knows what it could do for you. So that's what I would say around that.
Wow. Yeah, I love it. I absolutely love that idea of reading material and consuming material that's difficult and challenging. Very, very powerful stuff. What do you feel holds most people back from living a life of true abundance?
Perspective, hands down. Perspective, just not understanding what it is that we really have and how blessed we are on a day-to-day, just where you are right now. And I know that's been a big thing for you. That's why I love what you're doing. Mm-hmm. It's the ability to say, okay, well, I'll be a man of abundance when this happens. I would 99% guarantee you out there that no matter who you are, if you hit the pause button and define that perspective, and it's not a better or worse than from like material possessions or anything else like that, but take an assessment of where you're at in life. Chances are really good you have so much, and life is beautiful, and the life you have around you is beautiful. So I think perspective is the number one way to do that, and it's what holds people back.
Yeah, I love it. I love that answer. So what does living a life of abundance mean to you, Sean?
I think it's stop being a fan and participate. I think it's understanding that you're going to have influence on people and that you need to be the difference out there to the world. That's how we think, oh, if I'm not Gary Vee, I can't influence people. If I'm not Bill Gates and I don't have what he has, I haven't been successful, or people aren't going to listen to what I have to say. Every time you walk out the door and you're around other people, you're influencing that realm. Everywhere you go, just to the store, is it something as simple as holding open a door for somebody? Yeah. Yes. Tell me how it makes you feel when there's some small act of kindness. You may never know that. You'll never see that person again, but you're going to remember. It's going to have an impact on you. And how we all have that ability every day. All of us have that. What it means what living a life of abundance means is recognizing that there's a little bit of a responsibility there too. That you have that. You have that power. You have that influence. You can do that in so many different ways, up and down. It's vertical and horizontal in terms of your life. Understand that and that's because you're an important person. It's this dichotomy I always go through. It's not that individuals are important, but they are. It's wisdom versus discipline. It's chaos versus order. It's this constant relationship, this enigma between those two all the time. No, who you are as an individual isn't more important than everybody, but what you do individually does matter to the group. And that is what life and being a life of abundance, I think, is about, is recognizing that impact. And if we're all doing that, and then now you exponentially take that out and step out, now all of a sudden you have this team, and we saw this in the military. You can create a team that it can literally cut a swath of anything in one direction. You can do so much working as a unit, working together around that idea. And so when you see that work, you're like, man, that is beautiful. But then you can do all kinds of things with it, and that direction that it goes is kind of up to you at the same time. So, but I think all of those things, understand that you have the influence that, you maybe you're thinking about starting a podcast. Maybe you're thinking about starting a company. It's like, oh, well, or writing a book. After listening to the Drew's episode, I'm like, oh, I always want to write a book about parenting and stuff like that. And it's like, well, does the world need another parenting book? And I'm like, well, why not? It could influence one person. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be a New York Times bestseller to make a difference. And that's part of it too, is that you have the ability to influence. You have the power. You can do that and believe in all that. And stop being a fan and get in there and participate. Yeah.
Stop being a fan and get in there. Life is not a spectator sport. Absolutely love that, man. So we're going to close this up, man. I got to jump on another call here shortly, but before we close this up, what did we not talk about that you want to ensure that our abundant leaders get out of our conversation today?
So I want to say a word of thank you for you. So last month I got to go to Croatia as part of a nonprofit that I work with. I got to did a presentation to a bunch of small business owners, about 50 entrepreneurs and people like that. And listening to your podcast, and you mentioned it in Drew's episode, but it was one before that you had the lady on about failure, and I'm trying to remember her name because it was a while back, but it was around defining what failure was, and how, the first definition is around a lack of success, and the second one was basically around the inaction. And you put that out there, and I'm sure on your end you wonder, like all of us do that do this kind of stuff, is anybody even listening? Is anybody even paying attention? and I took that, and I was like, man, I love that, because then it creates that. Well, not doing something is failure, but then doing something and not succeeding, well, that could be failure as well. So you're kind of, you got to do something. It's kind of I get that as it's how it kind of gets the ball rolling. Not, you know what I mean? It creates that wonderful, wonderful kind of push in some ways that says you've got to get off and go one way or the other. And then how you define success, I use that in my speech, in my presentation to this group. It's what I ended on with them, and I wanted them to understand that. And I want to say, well, you did something. No, you had no idea before I just told you that. I mean, it made a huge impact on that day. And I had people come to me saying it really helped them define that perspective. It helped them feel a little bit better about taking that step forward, because they knew that it motivated them in that way. And so you never know where that light can go. You do something, you make some post on Facebook, anybody's listening, somebody might have heard it, and you never know where they can take it and what they can do with it. So don't get wrapped up in that. I want to say that so it's a thank you to you, what you're doing. I listened to that podcast episode. I took what you said. It opened I didn't know about that second definition. And it really helped me define what I looked at as failure, and it's helped me since then. And so the last thing I want to do is say thank you to you and what you're doing, and that it is making a difference out there in the world, for sure.
Brother, that means a lot to me. It really does. And I know you understand that as a podcaster and what you're doing, to know that somebody is using any little bit of my craziness and sharing it out there in the world, and is perpetrating and going out and making better things happen, man. I just love it. I absolutely love that. Thanks for that. And, man, we're going to have everything that we talked about linked up in the show notes, books, links, all that good stuff. Sean, just go out there, live your life of abundance, and, man, just keep paying it forward.
Thanks, brother. You too. You're doing a great job. Love you guys. Love what you're doing.
Awesome. Aloha. All right, guys, there you have it. Another amazing conversation. I want to invite you and encourage you to go check out the Come to the Table podcast. See what else Sean has got going on. He's having some really good conversations over there. And here's the thing, guys. I don't normally get into certain conversations with certain people. I can only have these conversations, as I said in the earlier conversation, I can only have these discussions and conversations with people that I love and that I know that love me, even though we have differences. Because here's the thing, when there's emotions involved in a conversation, there's never going to be a rational discussion. There's never going to be any resolution if there is conflict. You cannot have resolution when emotions are involved. You have to sit back, calm down, count to 10 like your mom used to say, and get the facts. Look at just the facts. Don't look at the hearsay. Don't pay attention to what other people said until you have been able to look at the facts and see what really is going on, so that you can make your own opinion of the situation. Then and only then can you have a rational conversation. Now, go out and live your life of abundance, and make sure to pay it forward.
That's all for today, Abundance Leaders. For more about our guests and the powerful information we shared with you today, be sure to sign up for our mailing list at menofabundance.com. We appreciate your time and look forward to hanging out with you on our next episode. So until then, be sure to pay it forward and live your life of abundance.